What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Funnels and Real Estate, where we take online internet marketing sales funnels and apply them offline to get you more deals and more profit. Today, I'm here with the 1031 guy, Scott Saunders. How's it going, man?
Doing great. Doing really good. Happy to be here with you today.
Yeah. Thanks for hopping on. So I want to ask you this question. For those people that don't know, what is a 1031 exchange?
Great question. Simply put, a 1031 exchange is a part of the tax code that allows people to defer paying capital gain taxes when they sell any property held for investment. So the way that I explain it is, if you do a sale, you give up a property, you get back cash. If you do an exchange, you give up a property and you get back another what's called like-kind property.
Okay, a like-kind property. Before we jump into that, why would someone do that? Why can't I just get my cash now and then go put that cash and invest it in another property?
Great question. If you get cash now, it becomes taxable when you receive cash. So anytime you sell, you'll have to pay the capital gain taxes. And a lot of people don't know, but you've got up to 4 different levels of taxes to pay. You've got to pay taxes on any depreciation recapture. So if you've taken depreciation over the years, you got to pay taxes on that at 25%. Federal capital gain taxes are either 15 or 20%, depending upon your taxable income. Then you've got this other sneaky little tax that was added a few years ago to pay for healthcare reform called the net investment income tax. That's an additional 3.8% tax over certain thresholds. So over 200,000 of net investment income, single filers, 250,000, married, filing jointly. And then finally, state taxes can be huge. If you're in California, the maximum state tax rate is 13.3%. So if you add up all 4 levels of taxes, you can find that a lot of what you thought of as your profit, you're going to have to give away in writing checks for all of those capital gain taxes. So the big incentive to do an exchange is, instead of taking all that money and paying taxes on it, reinvest your money into other properties, and then you're essentially pushing the taxes into the future. It's what's called a tax-deferred exchange. Sometimes you'll hear people call them tax-free, which isn't accurate. You're just deferring the taxes over and over and again and pushing them sometime into the future.
Right. So for example, let's say, just to make numbers clear, I'm going to receive $1 million from my investment, and I can either take that $1 million and do a 1031 exchange to go buy a property using that $1 million of equity that I have, or don't do a 1031, take that $1 million, let's say I have a 25% tax on it. So now I only have 750,000 left to go and buy a property with. So now I have less leverage to go and buy a property with. Is that right? Am I doing that math right?
Bingo, you got it right. So yeah, if you sold for $1 million, and I would say probably for $1 million, you're probably looking closer to maybe 700,000 is maybe what you'd keep. But here's the point. This is about real estate investing, right? How to get ahead with real estate investing. Most people that like real estate want to go out and buy more real estate, right? Most people. I'm not saying it for everybody, but the vast majority of people I deal with, they like it as a vehicle. Whatever niche of the market they like, they want to go out and buy more. So when you would do your example there for $1 million, if you've got to pay a couple $100,000 in taxes, what I tell people is, it's not only the taxes that are lost, but it's that purchasing power. So if I've got a residential transaction, I can put down, let's say 25%. I get a loan for 75%. So I get a lot more real estate. Commercial, let's say it's maybe 35% down, but you still are using leverage. So what I tell people is, the benefit of an exchange is that you now have 100% of your equity to redeploy, to reinvest with leverage into other like-kind properties. So the person that sells, they pay their taxes, they'll go up incrementally. The person that exchanges, because they have all of that equity working for them, they're going to acquire 20 years down the road a lot more real estate. So that'll kick off what? More cash flow, more to appreciate, more depreciation benefits, etc. So the exchange investor is much, much better off in the long term versus somebody who's paying the taxes every time they sell.
Right. That makes sense. Now, if we're deferring taxes to an indefinite point of time, and they keep upgrading properties, there's going to come a point, when you got to pay the Pied Piper, when you got to pay those taxes. So in your experience, the investors that take advantage of the 1031 exchanges and, you know, they sort of ramp up their investments and they buy bigger and bigger properties, do they end up paying less, the same, or more taxes than someone that just sells a property, pays taxes, buys another property, sells it, pays taxes? You know, someone who doesn't utilize the 1031 tax code.
Honestly, the answer is it's going to depend. So you are kicking the can, you're pushing the tax liability into the future, and we don't know what taxes will be like, but look at it this way. $1 today, because of inflation, is worth more to me than $1 30 years down the road.
Right.
It's less purchasing power. So even though the nominal numbers are bigger, it's more, it gives me more value today. So let me kind of try and address the question there. There are a couple ways. First of all, there are some people that maybe that pay the taxes down the road, but what we see a lot of people do is what's called a partially tax deferred exchange. Maybe down the road, they'll sell a property, they'll take some what we call taxable boot out, and they'll pay taxes on a little bit, and then they'll go exchange into another property. But what's interesting is a lot of investors just change the nature of their investment. Maybe they start off with their first investment's land.
Yeah.
And it doesn't produce any cash flow, so they exchange out of that into a income property. And then maybe they go to 2 income properties, and then maybe a larger income property, et cetera. Down the road, they might convert that into their investments out there known as Delaware Statutory Trust, or DSTs, that are relatively passive. So sometimes I see investors, as they go through this, they change the nature of their investment because that definition of like-kind property is so broad that it allows for lots of different types of assets. So yes, you can pay the taxes down the road, you can pay part of them. And one thing that might be a good strategy to at least mention here, some investors choose to keep to holding on to their real estate until they pass away. Then their heirs get it with a full step up in basis to the fair market value today. So let's just say I bought a $100,000 house. I do all these exchanges, and now I've got a real estate portfolio worth $5 million. If I pass away, my heirs get it with a basis of $5 million. So I never paid capital gain taxes throughout my lifetime. They now inherit it. They don't have to pay capital gain taxes either. Now, that's a huge strategy. Now, I'm very careful. I'm a 1031 expert. There might be estate tax issues. There could be other tax ramifications, because we don't know what the code's going to be like years into the future. But today, that step up in basis is a really nice tax incentive that's built into the code that people take advantage of.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah. That sounds amazing to me. Let me ask you a question. I actually posted this in a group, and it sort of exploded. It got the most engagement I've ever seen in this group. And this is not having to do with 1031s, but the net value of money over time. Would you rather have $6 million right now or $100,000 per month for the next 5 years? No taxes. Assume there's no taxes. Would you rather have $6 million now today or $100,000 per month for the next 5 years?
I haven't run the math on that, but if it were me, I take the burden in the hand right now. I take the $6 million today, because I think I could deploy that and get a better return on my investment today. That's what I think. Right. I don't know what that $100,000, what the return on investment is. That's just a cash flow piece coming in. Right. I don't know. So I'm curious. That's just, I'm giving you my off the record. If I had a little spreadsheet, I could crunch the numbers. So let me ask you, what's the upshot on that one? I'm curious.
Well, most people, see, I thought it was going to be cash flow, but then literally almost every 3/4 of the people said, no, there's inflation. You have to know that the cash flow you're getting in the future, if it's the same, it's going to be worth less. So there are all these tons of strategies people were pointing out. They're like, all right, I'm going to take this $6 million and invest it over here and get this % return. And it's going to get me $120,000 per month now, instead of $100,000. And they were just throwing out all these numbers. But the general consensus of this group was $6 million today. And then using their brains, go ahead and multiply that much faster than they could have gotten with just pure cash flow from whatever vehicle it was that was giving them that $100,000 per month.
Right. Interesting. Just out of curiosity, are you familiar at all with the concept of cost segregation?
I've heard of it before. I've never studied it.
So let me kind of piggyback on that. So cost seg is, and remember, I'm a 1031 expert, so I'm not a CPA, but I have a lot of experience with 1031s. Cost segregation is what would be referred to as component depreciation. So I go into a piece of real estate and I do a study and I break out the personal property components. And so let me tie it back to what you were saying. it's the exact same thing. It's the time value of money. When I now have a shorter depreciation schedule, let's say 5, 7, 10-year lifespan
Yeah.
versus a longer term to depreciate, I front load my depreciation benefits. So I take more depreciation today because that dollar is worth more to me today than it is 20 years down the road. So it's the same concept you were talking about. So investors use cost segregation to get a better return because they're maximizing their depreciation currently where the dollars are worth more, and they're maybe going to get less depreciation in the future when dollars are worth less. Same exact concept, but maybe a different way of analyzing it, but still tying in with rental real estate.
Huh, that's super cool. That's a neat little thing that I picked up. Okay, well, let me ask you this. What's your origin story? Like, what's your Batman origin story? How did you become the 1031 guy?
Great question. You know what? Kind of interesting. So I went to school, studied business economics, and I did a study of back then it was called the Forbes 400. Today it's the Forbes 500.
Yeah.
Study of the richest 400 people. And besides inheriting, the next most common thing they had was real estate. They owned real estate, invested in real estate, whatever it was. So I wanted to get into real estate. So right after school, through a chain of events, somebody knew somebody, I got involved with 1031 exchanges, did an interview with a 1031 exchange company in Northern California. And this is back before exchanges had treasury regulations and rules. It was kind of the wild cowboy country, but I wanted to learn about investment real estate from somebody who was actually doing it rather than the theory. And so I got involved at that time with an exchange company. I started out in a sales capacity, then I worked more in the operations, processing. So I've kind of worked both sides of it. And then the industry kind of exploded. You know, we had a lot of appreciation and people needed to do 1031. So the industry, which is this really small niche, became larger and larger and larger. Now it's a national industry. People do it in all the states. There are great exchange companies all over the country. So it's really, I've kind of grown up in the 1031 exchange industry.
Right. Do you like, what in particular do you like about 1031s more than any other strategy or any other thing you could have, built a career off of?
You know, I love, I am a big fan of people keeping their own money. It's a libertarian viewpoint or whatever it might be.
Hey, me too, man.
You work hard, you take a risk, and you should keep as much of your money as possible. And so fundamentally, that's what I love about 1031s is that 1031 exchange allows investors of any background, right? I mean, there are commercial investors that do it. What I love, your question was, what do I love? I love talking to people that own a single family home and they got a lot of taxes and they find out that you can do an exchange out of one single family and they'll maybe leverage it up and they'll buy 3 single families. They will never own a shopping center or an office building, but they might own those 3. Maybe they'll exchange it for 6. And that becomes their retirement income, right? All off of one little real estate investment that they scraped together some money on, about one single family home, held on to it, right? Put all the work in, covering the negative cash flow and all the hassles, but they leveraged it. And maybe it takes 20 years to get there, but now that's their retirement income where they can cruise around the world or take, go see their grandkids. That's what I love, are kind of the real life stories. We have a lot of farmers and ag people that do exchanges. They get out of ag land. They've worked it hard. They've got a little modest farmhouse, but the land's worth $2 million, and they've got a lot of taxes if they don't do an exchange. Right. And so I can share options with them. Here's some things you can do. You can exchange into, for example, a vacation home that's held for investment that meets certain criteria. So now they convert their farm and they buy some income property, but maybe they buy a vacation home up in Tahoe or Aspen or a ski place or a golf place or somewhere near the ocean that provides a lifestyle play for their family and their grandkids. So those are the types of things that I think are just fascinating, that you have so many options out there. And I love talking about the options with investors and giving us some things to think about and that they maybe haven't thought about before.
Right. Are you an investor yourself? I
am, yes.
Have you ever used a 1031 on your own property?
It's a great question. I have. So I have. I've done a number of exchanges. I've done what's called a delayed exchange. I sold a piece of dirt and I exchanged it for 5 income producing assets. That one I went into 2 different states. I've done something called a reverse exchange, where you buy your replacement property before you sell the one that you're relinquishing. I did that in Arizona, and then I followed that with the delayed exchange. So yeah, no, I practice what I preach. I've done it myself. I'll tell you, I plan to probably never sell my investments. I might reposition them, I might change them, I might redeploy capital, but I'm in it for the long haul. I love real estate. I think it's the biggest wealth creator. You've got so many great advantages of owning real property, right? You've got the cash flow, you keep up with inflation, depreciation benefits. I mean, I can go on and on. There's no other asset class out there that can perform, in my opinion, as well as real estate as consistently year after year.
Right. Yeah, I agree. 100% agree. All right, let me ask you this. You were talking about like kind earlier, and that's something I wanted to circle back to. So you talked about selling your piece of dirt and going buying some properties with it. What actually defines like kind property? It's something completely foreign to me. So this is something I definitely want to study up on.
Yeah, and there's so much misinformation on that term. Some people think a like for like means it's got to be very similar, right? If I sell land, I got to go to other land, or if I got a single family rental. So like for like just simply means any property, either one held for investment or used in a trade or business. So I could go from a property that we just did one recently on somebody had a Corvette business and they exchanged it for a ranch property. So they went business to investment. So you could be business to business, investment to investment, business to investment. So like kind is basically, it has to be real property.
Yeah.
So it has to be real estate. You can't do personal property anymore. That changed with tax reform a number of years ago. And the
personal property meaning like a yacht or a car or
like that. Yacht, car, collectible artwork, anything like that. Okay. With the Tax Cut and Jobs Act that went through a couple of years ago in 2007, end of 2017.
Yeah.
That eliminated personal property exchanges. So you can't do them anymore. So people used to be, let's say, a fishing boat. They would work on it and they could upgrade to a bigger fishing boat or corporate aircraft, all that stuff. That all went away. Real property. So the easy way to look at it is it has to be real estate. And there are only two types of property that are excluded. So the house you live in, you can't exchange that because you live in it. It's not held for investment. The only other type of property excluded is property that's held for sale purposes. So we might call that dealer property. Somebody that does fix and flips, or maybe a home builder, that type of property where you just buy it to sell it, that's excluded. Any other real property qualifies. So it could be residential for commercial, for industrial, for bare land, multifamily, senior housing. There are creative things out there that are probably maybe some of your listeners haven't thought about, but we do exchanges on air rights. Literally, air in New York City air right is considered real property. You can exchange it. Water rights can be exchanged. A vacation home held for investment. An agricultural easement. The list goes on and on. It's very, very broad. So simple question. Sorry for the long answer.
No, I love it. Okay, so let me ask you this. For you to be able to use the 1031 exchange, all you really have to have is a piece of real estate held for investment. And you can exchange that for either another piece of real estate held for investment or a business piece of real estate. Can you elaborate on the business part?
Yeah. So you're bingo. You got it right. You start with a piece of real estate that's held for investment. So it's generally it's going to be a rental property of some sort, unless it's bare land that you hold for appreciation. Let's just say you're in the auto repair business, and there's an opportunity to pick up a freestanding shop out there, right? Maybe it's an old gas station that you're going to use for your auto repair. So you could exchange out of a rental house and exchange into that auto repair business, because now you're using it as part of your business. So it's not something you live in. It's a business property when it used to be before an investment property. But those are all both like kind.
Okay, cool. That makes sense. Okay, let me ask you this. What are some time deadlines for a basic 1031 deferral?
Great question. The most common exchange, and you may have heard of this, is what's called the delayed exchange, referred to in the code as a deferred. But a delayed exchange is when you sell a property. So when you close on it, that starts day zero. You have 45 calendar days until midnight of the 45th day to identify properties that you want to buy. So there's some different identification rules. but you've got to narrow it down to some specific properties in that first 45 days. Then you have an additional 135 days, so a maximum of 180 calendar days to close on properties that you've identified in that 45-day period. So the first period, we call it the 45-day identification period.
Yeah.
The longer 180-day period, we call the exchange period. And you've got to fit in those parameters. You can't find something on day 60 and try and make it qualify in the exchange. You actually have to purchase something that you had properly identified in that first 45 days.
Right. So what happens if 45 days pass and you don't find anything?
Then you pay your taxes.
So you sell the property, you pay your tax. Okay, that makes sense.
Because there's nothing to exchange into. So if you didn't find anything, so let's look at what that means for you as an investor. It means you're really, really motivated once you close on a property in the next month and a half to nail down some potential replacement properties. So you've got a really kind of a short time window to find other assets that you may want to exchange into. So you're highly motivated. What I recommend practically is when you get your property that you're showing listed, start working with the real estate professional, what you want to identify right then. Right. This is my price range. Here's what I want to buy. Here's what I'm looking for. And have them start queuing up properties for you and send them your way. That way, it takes a little bit of the pressure off of that 45 days because you can start nailing it down. You can make offers, contingent offers on properties. There's a lot you can do before day zero.
Right. Okay. And sorry, day zero is the closing date?
Closing date, correct.
Okay. So if I'm even thinking about selling my property, I should already be building relationships and making sure I've got a flow of properties to be looking at, list my property, start analyzing these deals and seeing if one of them is going to be my golden goose, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we mentioned at the beginning, right? An exchange is a sale, and then you're followed by, you're giving up a property and you're getting some back. You want to look at both sides of that equation, right? As you're listing your property at a good price, you want to be working with your realtor or your real estate broker on what you want to purchase and have them start, giving you properties. Okay, here's what looks good. I like the returns. I don't like this. But think of it as kind of two halves, right? There's a sale half and there's a purchase half. They're integrated, right? And you kind of want to work on them almost concurrently in a lot of respects.
Right. Okay. I'll just ask a couple more questions. My first one is, what are some of the biggest pitfalls you see investors having when it comes to 1031 exchanges?
Great question. Pitfall number one, don't decide you want to set up an exchange after you close. You can't go back after the fact and do it. And I'll tell you, every month we see so many people that a couple days after they close on their property, they think about setting up an exchange. So pitfall number one, if you want to preserve the ability to do it, you've got to get it set up right before closing.
Right.
Now, that's an important one. The other one would be what I call kind of the requirements for deferral. So if you want to defer all your capital gain taxes, not pay any capital gain taxes, you've got two simple rules to meet. Number one, you got to reinvest all your net equity. Number two, you have to have the same or a greater amount of debt. So if I sell a property for $400,000 and I've got $100,000 of debt and a $300,000 mortgage, I need to have at least $300,000 of mortgage on whatever I buy. That could be on one property, it could be split among a couple, and I've got to reinvest my net equity. So to answer your question, the pitfall is sometimes people forget about that debt component. I think people know intuitively I've got to reinvest my cash. But then when you think about, I don't want to have as much debt, I want to get more cash flow. If you have a lower amount of mortgage, that's called mortgage boot. And you pay taxes on that just as if you put the cash into your pocket.
Okay, so let's say I have $1 million property and the mortgage is for $700,000.
Okay.
So I'm taking that $300,000 equity. I'm going to go and take that, do a 1031 exchange, and invest it into another property. Now, let's say, just for simplicity's sake, I take that $300,000 equity and I go invest into another $1 million property. Maybe it provides me more cash flow. But I go invest it into another $1 million property. But this time, the mortgage is $800,000.
Okay.
And so now I only have $200,000 in equity in that apartment, or whatever it is, whatever the investment is. Now I have $100,000 left over.
Right.
So what happens to that $100,000 left over if there is money left over from the equity to your new property?
Right. Great setup. If I have $100,000 that I don't put into the new property, that $1 million property, that's called cash boot. So you're going to pay taxes on that. That's fully taxable. So you really have two options. So let's kind of look at the options there. One is you could buy another small property. So if you do that, you go million to million and you leverage up a little bit. You could buy a small property and then get tax deferral. So I sell one and I bought two, one at $1 million, one at 100,000 or 200,000.
Right.
Or you just pay taxes on that. And that's something to keep in mind. A lot of people that do exchanges, they may not match up the numbers perfectly. So they still get the benefit of a 1031, but maybe the numbers don't perfectly line up. So if I sell for $1 million, maybe I buy for a touch less and I pay taxes on 20,000, right? A little bit of boot, but I still get the benefits of an exchange on everything else. So don't think because you can't necessarily get the numbers to match perfectly that there's no benefit. A lot of investors get most of the benefit and they may pay taxes on a little bit of leftover cash or a little bit of that mortgage boot.
Right. Awesome. One more question and we'll wrap up here. Okay. What's your favorite thing you like to spend your cash flow on?
That's a trick question.
Yeah.
Well, that's funny. If I told you, you're going to think I'm really boring. I love to spend cash flow on buying more real estate. So,
on your what?
On real estate. I like to buy more real estate.
Yeah.
So, there's a funny meme I shared with my kids the other day, and it was a guy staring off the distance. He goes, "I look like I'm okay, but deep down inside, I just want to buy more houses." Right?
Yeah, I love that. That's good.
That's kind of me. But practically speaking, I love travel. My kids travel, and I go a lot of different places, and so travel's a big one for me. I took them to Italy recently. We had a great trip, and I got super cool trips planned. That's kind of my shtick. Travel, doing fun things. I'm taking my son diving with great white sharks this summer, and cool stuff like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, my last and final question is: if someone wants to get a 1031 exchange, who are they going to call?
Who are they going to call? Well, I'll tell you what. I'd be more than happy to either help people out with exchange. Or what I spend a lot of time doing is just answering questions. Somebody says their scenario, hey, can I do this? What are the pros and cons? What's risky? What's aggressive? That's what I do. The company that I work for is Asset Preservation, and our toll-free number is 800-282-1031. And you can get a hold of us. And so it's an easy one to remember. What I tell people is, even if you're just kicking around ideas, most of the time when we get a phone call, it's somebody kind of doing some pre-planning. They're not necessarily setting up an exchange today, but they're thinking of selling a property and they want to know what their options are. There are some pitfalls to watch out for. If you're in a partnership, for example, there's some issues you need to address in advance, things like that. We can kind of talk through those issues and say, here's what you want to do. And then maybe direct them to get back with their CPA or tax advisor, for specific advice, but we can give some broad brush guidance. So just keep that in mind. A good qualified intermediary, we're that company in the middle that facilitates the exchange. We're going to give some ideas and suggestions, and then you go back to your CPA and say, hey, what makes sense in my particular situation?
Right. That makes sense. What's your website?
Website, apiexchange.com. So it's asset preservation. A is in apple, P is in Paul, I is in igloo, and the word exchange.com.
Awesome. And we'll put a link in there in the show notes for everybody.
Yeah, do that. And by the way, I'll just a little plug for the website. Ton of information. You can calculate your capital gain tax on there. There's a lot of really good information. So, we've got hundreds of thousands of hits every month, and it's got a lot of articles. So it's got introductory articles, and we've got more advanced information. So kind of A to Z, it's on the website.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for joining us today, Scott. We're about to jump into the behind the scenes Q&A. So if you want to go ahead and find out what more he has to say, go ahead and go to funnelsandrealestate.com. But as far as the public interview, thanks for hopping on, Scott. I really appreciate it.
It's been great talking to you. Great chatting. I love talking about 1031s, how people can get a better ROI and improve their returns. It's always fun to talk about. So thanks for time.
Awesome, man. Thank you.